Hi guys and welcome. I am Enigmius and today here we are in the Nether again. What a surprise. We are so close to being done with the Nether Crawler. It's freaking insane. Even more insane when you figure I actually restarted the entire build. That's right, I did it all over from scratch. I was in the process of wiring in the force fields and it just decided that it wasn't going to move anymore. And it didn't matter what I did to try and fix it, it wasn't going to move ever again. So 4 lap packs and a mining laser later, we had an empty hangar. And surprisingly, well maybe not surprisingly, it actually, the second time around it went together much faster than the first time. We're obviously heading that way now. We're going to go take a look. I was just down in the bottom of the larger of my 2 quarries. The smaller one is actually done. It's just the quarry block is just sitting there biding its time until the big one is done, and then I can clear out the section of land in between the two. We'll have a nice big fat area in which to build our next structure in the Nether. This is the rebuilt Nether Crawler. And these blue bits, I want to, for some reason, every time I see them, I want to call them sparkly. They're not sparkling, they're just like glass, but blue, and those are actually the Forcefield blocks. Those are the bits and pieces that will protect the underside of the vehicle from things like nuclear explosions and ghasts and all that other stuff. And you can see they extend the entire length of the vehicle, which is a very substantial length for a vehicle in Minecraft. And then up front we've got another force field. This is the substitute for any kind of block breaker machine. I had originally planned on doing something with frames kind of moving up and down with block breakers on it to clear the way in case there was an obstacle that I didn't want to go around. This is the ideal substitute for that. In fact, if you look up here, you can see where I was messing around, and I've already started to take out little chunks of the hangar. This is a force field with the block cutter upgrade. Block cutter, I have to remember that. It's not block breaker, but the end result is exactly the same. So I've left the force field active because it really doesn't draw much power to leave it as it is, as you see it. But right away you can see the difference between this one. Actually, I should go back here. Be a little easier to see. The difference between the Mark II version, if you want to call it that, and the original is this one's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. It's not quite so blocky, I don't think. It's wider, obviously, in the back end from side to side. It's wider than the original Nether Crawler, but it's not quite so tall. And then the remainder of the hull, as we kind of move along here, is a little bit more shapely, so to speak. It's not quite so blocky. Once again, it's got a little bit of shape to it, a little bit of aesthetic form to it. Obviously I haven't quite... Do I have any covers on me? Let's see if I have any. I do. I have some basalt covers. We'll just throw a couple covers on here while we're looking at it. Solve that problem. This was actually a little part that I had to add on because that right there, that white block that you're looking at underneath, is actually one of the force field projectors. And it was easier for me to put it there and then kind of cover over top than it was to locate something else for it. Now, one of the oversights in rebuilding it is that I neglected to give myself an easy way to get into and out of the vehicle, and currently the only way to do that is into the barrel of one of the TNT launchers. So we're gonna try and wedge our way in here. Sometimes it takes a few attempts. Now you can see, after our testing with the ice blocks, I decided we might as well just go for it and put a pair of TNT launchers on the vehicle, so when we're flying around we'll be able to lob TNT, Nova Catalysts, Nova Cataclysms directly ahead, just for fun. And that's what this is, and again, it's also the entry and exit of the vehicle. The other side is exactly the same. It's a bit of a pain to get up there, but here it is, TNT launcher. I've tested the form for the launcher. Particularly, I wanted to make sure that with the cockpit panels along the side here, I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to cause any blocks to get hung up on them and, you know, fail to launch. The testing that I did in the overworld seemed to indicate that it would be fine. We'll find out soon enough, I guess. Now, none of the deployers are wired up yet, and that's why I say we're not quite done. I just got as far as I could, and now I've got to sit down and figure out how I want everything to work. I do, however, have the redstone computer, the red power computer set up. I've got 2 IO expanders in here, and that's because I will need them. The one IO expander will be in charge of the motors, as well as the force fields, and possibly, actually most likely, the inventory management for the deployers, the TNT deployers, and the other one will be responsible for firing control for the deployers, the bomb bays, if you want to call them that, plus the TNT launchers. So I absolutely needed more than one IO expander, so I sat down and did the mathemifications and figured out how to use a second one. So that one's basically set up and ready to go. You can see I haven't actually got any bundled cables leading into it, but that's not a big deal. Like I say, the structure is basically done. All we're waiting on is the wiring. Now I just want to show you some more of the differences between this one and the previous one. First of all, and this is proven already a little bit more useful than I thought it might, and that is with this new one, I have full access to all of the motors. Worst case scenario, I might have to break out 1 or 2 frames to get to everything, but realistically speaking, I can get to all the wires, all the motors, all the cables, everything. It's a lot more open and accessible than the previous iteration, which when I was testing this, after I got everything all set up and going again, I did have to come back here and reset a motor with the diamond drill, if you catch my meaning. So it was nice to be able to get back here without having to dig out the entire vessel. Now, the other thing back here is I've actually got thermopiles on board. Again, after the testing with the ice and determining that we can, in fact, get and keep water in the nether legitimately. And by that, I mean without EE. I'm not trying to put down anyone who's using EE, but if you've been watching the series, you know for the time being, I'm leaving EE to the side for the most part and trying to focus on builds that don't make use of it as much as possible. So just by using ice blocks that I made in the overworld, I gathered some snow, I ran it through a compressor, I got the ice blocks, I brought them to the nether, I put them in place. They melted. I've got some lava source blocks underneath the thermopiles. There's a thermopile there. There's 2 in each side. If you want to call them wings, that would probably not be a bad description of the structural elements. So I've got a total of 4 thermopiles, which realistically speaking is not a lot. It's not generating a ton of power. Each side of the vessel also has 4 batteries, and you can see they're all fully charged. So this is sort of when it's sitting idle, when we're not doing anything. It has a chance to regenerate energy without having to feed it blue electric batteries. And one of the reasons for that is I actually set up, if you recall in the old one, I had an ender chest with blue electric batteries that were charged in the thermopile, in the underwater hangar, in the overworld, and then the full batteries would be pulled out and cycled through to recharge the battery boxes in the nether. Well, I tried doing the exact same thing with Lapatron crystals for the MFSU that is powering the force fields. Here's the MFSU up here. And you can see, actually, I don't have any Lapatron crystals in it at all right now. I think I've got them charging in the charging bench downstairs. But basically, the whole idea was going to be the same, is that I would have an ender chest. It would cycle full Lapatron crystals into the MFSU here, pull out the empties, drop them back in the ender chest, and then those would be cycled through a power plant somewhere, either the geothermal power plant here or the solar power plant in the overworld. I originally set it up connected to the solar power plant in the overworld, and I lost about 6 Lapatron crystals. They just disappeared into thin air. So that kind of, I realized that it wasn't a stable, bug-free way of transmitting power back and forth. Lapatron crystals aren't hugely expensive to make, but for some reason, every time you lose a diamond to a bug or a glitch or something like that, it's that little extra bit of a sting that makes you think twice about continuing to try and use that method. So we aren't going to be using ender chests to cycle things to and from the Nether Crawler once it's out in service, but we're not drawing a ton of power either. Having both of these force fields active draws very, very little power overall. So we're going to be fine. We're going to be absolutely fine. The other change is I got rid of the frame system that I previously had to cycle the inventory to and from the deployers in the deployer bays, like this guy right here. The reason I originally came up with that is because I hadn't done a lot with deployers, and I had it in my mind that the only way to get inventory in and out of a deployer short of making it deploy something, was through the back end. So similar to like a filter or a transposer, I thought you would have one that was sort of doing the business end, either gathering or, you know, whatever, the input side, and then the other side was the output side, and that's just the way it was. You couldn't do things through the sides. Well, first of all, you can send things to and from the sides in some of those blocks themselves, but the deployers as well, you could. But when I realized you could do that, I had already had it stuck in my mind that I was going to use the frame system to switch between a filter and a pipe. When I had a chance to rebuild it, I realized that was pointlessly complicated, and especially if I wasn't going to be using an ender chest to charge up my blue electric battery boxes, getting rid of those extra 16 motors actually probably a good idea. So right now we've got the very simplified version, and as you can see, it's also not wired up yet, but we've got a filter. When it receives a redstone pulse, it will pull things out of the deployer inventory, and then I also have pipes connecting to the deployer so that I can feed it new inventory if I want to change the ammunition. So all I have to do is finish getting that wired up, write the routines for it in the red power computer, and that'll be a fully automated system to change the inventory in the deployers themselves. As far as the TNT cannons, the launchers, I don't think I'm going to do an automated system. For one, I'm getting a little bit burnt out on the whole compressed, like claustrophobic environment. You can see here when I'm in the cockpit, this is the cockpit right here. And I've specifically set it up this way so I've got kind of a view. I was trying to make the frames transparent, and I had a motor down there with a bat box, and I was sliding them in and doing all kinds of crazy stuff to get the frames all transparent, and I missed, and I put a cover on something that should have had a panel. I wound up having to pull the whole thing apart again, so I said to hell with it. For now, this is plenty. So this won't be a bad place to stand and look around. I can issue instructions to the monitor right here. You can see I've been messing around already. And then I can kind of take a look outside and see exactly what's going on. But as far as working in behind here, despite having made it much more open and much less cramped than the previous iteration, it's still pretty claustrophobic. So I'm getting kind of, like I say, a little bit burnt out on such teeny tiny spaces to work in. So I'm not in a huge rush to load up this area here with wires and all kinds of pipes and extra junk that's just going to make it even more claustrophobic. If I did that, I would have basically one tile, this middle tile, to walk down through to get there, and I'm just like, nah, I'm done with it. I'm over it. We've got plenty going on as it is, so for the time being, we're just going to leave it. I'll load it manually and we'll do the testing, and then once we get it out into the field, we'll be fine. So the last thing I'll show you before we're actually going to take this thing out of the hangar today. We're going to get it outside where I can do proper testing on the launchers and the deployers without having to worry about blowing up the ship or anything else. But I just show you the force field stuff here. This is a deflector unit, and behind it is the block cutter upgrade to the deflector unit. So that's what's creating the force field in the front. Then we have, see, we're already stuck up on an IO expander. And we have, this is the force field core up top and the force field EU injector. And these are basically the brains and the heart of the force field. You can't have a force field system without these two blocks. And I've got, obviously, the MFSU is feeding power to the EU injector. The injector is sending it to the force field core. You can see we're at 10 million units of power, which is different from EU. Force field power is 10 units of power per 1 EU. So to charge this thing up fully takes 1 million EU, and then it shows up in here as 10 million. That's basically the extent of it. This information here, the transmit range and the linked projector, is meaningless for the time being. I don't know if it's a bug or if it was abandoned as a feature or something. I don't know. I just know from the wiki and my experience, these don't have an impact on anything. And then in order to link force field deflectors, like the ones I've got up front, you would put a blank MFFS card in here, turns it into a frequency card, and then you put that in the injector. And I'll show you up here. Actually, this is a blank MFFS card. I've got 6 of them kicking around. So that if I want, I've also got 6 deflectors here. So if I want, I can set up specialized deflectors elsewhere on the ship. But for now, these are just the blank ones. And then this is another deflector. This one is just very plain Jane. I've got the frequency card. This links it to the force field core. So that's how you link everything together, and it's all, this one's got all the power of the core available to it. I've got the dimensions set up. How far away from the actual deflector block does the force field start? In this case, it's 5 blocks down. So it's under the vessel. And then we've got the dimensions. It's 8 wide. It's actually 17 wide because this is like a radius, even though it's not a circle. And same with this, is actually 41 long, basically the full length of the vehicle. So that's the force fields. And now this block here is actually just set up because I was testing the solid redstone signal that I'm using with the engines just to make sure that it was working. So I'm going to leave that there for now, and it'll be convenient if I want to test what's going on with other shenanigans. I don't have it set up right now to enter multiples, but what I can do is tell it to move forward. If I could get my fingers on the right keys. And laggy, but it moved. Let's do that again. It's a big ship. It's entitled to be a little bit laggy. You can see we're moving. The way this works, I found from trial and error, is that you can't, if you move a vehicle like this with the force fields active, the force fields stay where they are. They don't actually move with the vessel. And in this case, those are still block cutter force field blocks. I do not want to be running the ship through those. It's a great way to evaporate the ship. So what I'm doing, the way the forward routine and all the other movement routines work, is that they actually drop both shields for a split second while the ship moves, and then they raise the shields again, so that it makes sure that we're not running the ship into them, and at the same time allows movement without having to get too complicated from the user point of view. And we're actually getting, there we go. We just busted our way out of the hangar, at least halfway out. We got one more block to go and the bottom half will be out. So eventually I will add in routines so that I can enter a quantity of blocks to move. And then I can say, you know, for example, 10 forward, and it'll just move 10 blocks forward all on its own. But for the time being, I just wanted to get the synchronized movement with the shields themselves. And I'll probably set it up as well so that I have a quick and easy command to just turn off the deflectors altogether, because that's kind of messing up my view, if you know what I mean. But you can see we've basically busted our way out of the hangar. I couldn't give you a better example of how the block cutter system is going to work for clearing our way out of obstacles. You can see if I wanted to, I could head outside now and collect all of these blocks that we're dropping. I could actually install, if I wanted to, transposers just flipped upside down. You've seen how I use the transposers in the tree farm. I could do the same thing here, only have them facing downwards and have them as sort of like a vacuum. I don't care. I'm not sick of the project. It's been a lot of work. It's been a tremendous amount of work and solving problems on the fly, because whenever you're working with a project this size involving frames, there's always something. So I'm just kind of happy that it's working the way it was originally intended to work. We've got that functionality in the front to clear obstacles away from us. So for example, you can see we've got that nether rack in front of us. We don't have to go around that if we don't want to. We can just go directly through it, which I think is kind of cool. You can see the ghast. He's kind of like, finally something flies in the nether that's bigger than him. I don't think he knows quite what to make of it, but I am nicely contained within my cockpit. The ghast won't even start shooting at me until obviously I try and exit the vehicle, and then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I see you. So that's where we're at. I just wanted to show you guys this now, so that when I get it all wired, I can just basically, the next episode, I can be like, okay, we're wired, let's go. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go. We're gonna drop some TNT on some stuff. We're gonna launch some TNT at some stuff. We're gonna fly through a mountain. We're gonna do all this crazy stuff, and that will be the Nether Crawler. And the more I was able to show you now, before we did that, the better off we would be. So there we are. We can look down. Actually, let's do a couple more blocks forward, just so we can look down over the shenanigan. I suppose I could have just typed forward, forward, forward. Actually, let's do that. Forward, forward, forward. It's not exactly user-friendly, but it'll work. There we go. Nice little view down at the spot that we won't be landing on because we're in our own private Nether vehicle. So one more episode. The next episode is going to be all about flying around and causing mischief and mayhem in the Nether Crawler, and then we'll be on to the next project. So I hope you're enjoying the series. I really hope you're enjoying it. And if you are and you're not yet subscribed to my channel, the easiest way to know when I add the next video is to subscribe. So I'll see you in the next episode, guys, and take care.